PRovoke podcast is brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialists Marketeers. Support for this podcast comes from Notified, the integrated, intelligent and easy-to-use PR software. Get a free demo today at notified.com.
Hello and welcome to the PRovoke podcast. I am Diana Marszalek. I'm senior reporter with PRovoke Media, and I have today with me Connect2 Communications President Rich Williams. Hello, Rich.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. I can see you sitting in your home. I'm in my home. We're here. It's almost a year later, and we're all still looking at each other through Zoom, right?
We are. I think this time last year, I was prepping to go to Mobile World Congress and watching to see. I don't know if it had been canceled yet by this date, but it was looming to be canceled.
Yeah. So here we are. And first, why don't you tell us a little bit, if you could, please, about your firm, and then we can go from there and talk where we are and where we aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. So Connect2 Communications was started in 2003. Mm-hmm. I'd always been inside before starting the agency. I'd worked for Intel and a company called Hatteras Networks and a company called Infocus, and then worked at PAX in DC. And I started the agency to focus on B2B tech. Mm-hmm. And our client base has historically been some of the more technical tech out there. So we don't do any B2C, although we've done it on occasion. We represent clients that are making the equipment that goes in AT&T's network and Windstream's network and OpenReach's network, and that goes into IBM's network. And so just really, it's kind of deep tech. And we've been in place since 2003. We've, seen some ups and downs like every agency has. You had growth spurts and growth retractions, and it's been good though. It's been, I think part of the reason why we still exist after 17 years and why we have some clients that we've now represented for the third time is because that focus on storytelling and really pushing clients to think beyond what they make.
Excellent. So two things came up just in your introduction that I want to ask you about. You often hear about people going from in-house, from agency to in-house. That's right. Sort of the more traditional career path, right? You went the other way. Was it because in your workings with agencies, you saw the need, or was it a more personal reason than that?
Well, it was. So I didn't plan to start an agency. So I left a company that was struggling with them as my first client. And I figured, well, I'll get 3 or 4 clients and then I'll go back inside somewhere.
Right.
Like it was a bridge. Mm-hmm. But then I kept getting clients.
Oh, well.
And I'm like, I kind of like being the boss.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I first started the model with contractors, and then realized that didn't scale. Mm-hmm. And then moved to employees. But I did start it with the intent that, I'd hired and fired and worked with and inherited a whole bunch of agencies over my career. And I knew what I didn't think worked, right? And the thing I didn't think worked was the way a lot of agencies are divorced from what the client's actually trying to accomplish, right? And really little consideration or understanding of all the things that happen inside a company that push them to make certain decisions or push them to not make certain decisions, right? There's a lot of politics inside a company, especially the bigger the company is, that a PR agency is just always like knocking the door saying, what can we announce? What can we announce? What can we announce? But it's not really looking at, wait, what is the company really trying to accomplish? Like, what are all the things that have to happen internally so the person that we work for can be successful?
And why is that? Because in some ways that's fundamental to achieving the goal, right? Which is getting the company out there and accomplishing what they want to accomplish. So why is that, do you think?
Because I think it's more surface layer. Like I think most agencies typically they apply the same tactics to company A, they do to B, to C, to E, to E. And the ones that are most successful are the ones that fit within that mold. Mm-hmm. Right, but not all clients fit within that mold. Especially like a lot of our clients have been international companies that want to make build a presence in the U.S. with U.S. press, right? That don't understand the market. Like so, there are working with a German company is very different than working for an Icelandic company or working for a company based in Tel Aviv, right? The way they work as a business is very different. So taking time to understand that, understand how they think, how they process stuff, their priorities is important, right? You know, one of the things we tell our clients all the time is your story is bigger than what you make, right? People don't buy what you make just because you've made it. They buy it because they trust the company has smart people, or they're building the right thing and they're listening to the market, that they've got the right partners, they've got the right channels, they've got the right executive team, they got the right funding, right? There are elements, especially for smaller companies, there are elements that make up an entire package that people are buying.
Right.
They're not going to buy the best product in the world if they don't trust that it's made by people they think are reputable, trustworthy.
Right. So we often see these stories coming out, you know, consumer focused brands, you know, the ones that either pull at your heartstrings or let you know what's going on, the deep emotional thing. How does that work in a deep tech B2B situation?
Oh, it's interesting. So and I'll give you a couple examples. We had a client called, well, they're not a client now, so I won't say their name. I'll give them.
Okay, Client X.
Client X, they made what's called an LTE router, right? So it was a router that could connect to the network and then deliver an LTE service. So one of the things one of their customers did, and it was a really smart IT director from a school system, is their school system was one of the poorest and biggest in the country, right? And a huge portion of their base, their schools, their kids didn't have access to broadband. So he put these LTE routers on school buses and drove them out into the district at night and turned them on so kids could do homework.
That's amazing. That story's right.
Right. So we call those the adjacent story. It's not about what the product is. It's what the product enables the customer to do they couldn't do before that impacts the lives of their community. And you can always find that story if you ask enough questions. So we got that story about a school district in California covered by the BBC.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So it was, so all the tech press covered it, but we also got covered by the BBC. So now another example is we have a client that had a data center in Iceland, right? A data center is walls and power and security.
Right.
Right? It's just a data center, right? So we were able to, so they were carbon neutral data center, which gave them all their power came from renewable energy as opposed to coal or gas. So that was already interesting to the data center press. We extended it to look at the energy press. But we also had people come into the data center, like there was a visual effects company that came to the data center, right? So we did a press tour where we brought over the tech reporters from Hollywood Reporter, from Variety, from The Atlantic, and we took them on a tour of film sites in Iceland. We did all this other, we had the film board come and talk to them. We did a tour of the visual effects studio and they got to watch how things were rendered. And we talked about how much compute power required to render today's movies. And then they did a tour of the data center. And that got covered in Newsweek and it got covered in, because we made it relevant to you, even though it's the deepest tech, we made it relevant because we made it interesting to the reporters who, they wanted to go to Iceland. Like, who doesn't want to go to Iceland?
Right.
But we made the tour relevant and we made the tech relevant to how they covered their industry. And the thing I think a lot of people miss is there are opportunities like that for everything, right? So we had a client that was making IoT device sensors, and they had, one of their clients was US Sugar. So yes, we pitched it to all the press that were covering IoT, but we also pitched it to the agriculture reporters, because agriculture reporters, you might find one or two that are looking for the ability to write about something other than crop yields.
Yes.
I can write about tech. Oh, wait, IoT, I know about that. Like you give the reporter something. So there's transportation, like if you've got a solution that you're ultimately selling to transportation companies, there are transportation reporters at every big publication.
And you're also targeting the consumer press. So even though you are sort of deep tech B2B, the story can go far and wide, and the decision makers see these stories ultimately, and the public sees these stories, obviously.
Well, and you're appealing to different layers of because ultimately what we want to do with PR is we want to help sales overcome any of those objections we know happen normally in the sales cycle.
Such as when you say that.
So they think that there's so let's say there's a technology that one of our clients has decided to embrace and certify on, but there's competing technologies out there, right? Other standards groups are working on different technologies. We will run a campaign that talks about what a customer can do, what an end customer can do based on this technology versus the other ones. Where are the gaps? Where are the limitations? Where are the strengths? So that when those stories run that talk about the benefits of XGS-PON versus NG-PON2, they already have the end customer has already read stories saying, oh, I hadn't considered XGS-PON and how it has to do this and this, right? So we know those technology questions are going to come in the interview. We try to give the customer ability to answer some of those questions before they get in a sales meeting, before it becomes a negotiation issue, right? Or if we know that we've got a small company that, and they're competing with much larger companies, then we're going to do more press about their funding mechanism. And they've got deep bench from their venture capitalists. They've got executives that have built companies successfully before to the $1 billion range to show, yes, this company might be young, but the lineage of the executive team and the investors is deep.
And it sounds to me, so you're in this deep tech world that you're pitching and working with and all, but it sounds to me like you still kind of are a big believer in the old power of the press.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, and sometimes that press takes a very long time to mature, right? Yes. So the bigger press, right? Like go back to Vern, we had a story that we worked on with Time Magazine for 1.5 years before it ran.
1.5 years. What was that about? Or can't you say?
Oh no, it was a story. It was a great story. It was a story about it was a story about Iceland and all the different ways renewable energy is impacting the economy, and data centers was one of them. Right, okay. Our client was the example as one of them. Okay. But we toured. There were all these other little small businesses, from like drying fish and sending them to developing countries as protein, which was also part of the story, right? So we were willing to look at a bigger story about Iceland. That means, we set up all the tours. We set up every meeting they had. We organized the travel. I went on the trip with a reporter, but we knew we'd be a part of the story. But a big story that a lot of people would read that might not have read about my client, but would read about the economic impact to Iceland and beyond of renewable power.
Interesting. You often hear now, or I often hear, every story is a tech story, every industry is a tech industry, all that. But you're looking at a little from the flip side also, right? Mm-hmm. That every tech story is
a personal story,
consumer, human interest, larger story, which is amazing, which is great, right?
Well, it's sometimes you have to stretch for that, right? Like, and I don't mean stretch the truth. I mean, you have to dig deep, right? Like, so again, for Vern, their story hadn't changed from the day that we started working for them to the day that we stopped working for them, right? They were still just a data center. But one of the things I saw was the U.S., the American Society of Civil Engineers had issued a report that the U.S. power grid was rated D+.
Okay.
Right. So it's disjointed. Some of it was built 100 years ago, and then the Icelandic power grid was 10 years old. Right. One of the most robust in the world. So if we wanted to marry all the kind of applications that big companies were looking to run in their data centers, HPC, high performance computing, AI, machine to machine learning, all these things that take a lot of compute power and energy, if they were going to make a bet to put that in Boston, where there's a shaky power grid, or somewhere in New Jersey, then there probably wasn't enough power to support their goals long term, because you can't just add power to a power plant. Mm-hmm. Right. And there was a time in England recently where they were telling there was 2% availability on the power grid in the UK.
Okay.
Right. And they were telling mass market retailers to turn the power off at night to help save power. Mm-hmm. So we commissioned an energy analyst to write a study. We said, so this is our premise. You need to prove it's true or not. If it's not true, that's fine. Prove it's not true. Mm-hmm. But if it's true, we want to know. And it was basically, we're going to come to a point where the amount of power available on power grids is not sufficient to support the compute requirements for all these applications that every company wants to do. And they don't care that 5 other companies want to do the same thing and they're going to use the same power. They just want to make sure they have the power. And why Iceland, which one of the objections of Iceland was, well, I can't just walk down the street to my data center.
Right.
I have to get on a plane, right? It's that we knew that was an objection.
Okay.
So this study, and it was published, and actually USA Today covered this study, which, so we wanted to overcome the objection that Iceland's too far. I have to get on a plane. I can't just go see it. Right, but it's worth that trade-off because you're confident that there's enough power in the Icelandic power grid to power every single application you want to run for the next 50 years.
You, in reading about what your work is, in addition to heavy media relations and building those relationships, I saw you do also work with analysts a lot, right? Is that kind of given the backbone to your story? Is that?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting to watch how the analyst landscape has shifted even in the last 2 years through consolidation, and then a lot of people breaking off to do their own firms that got caught up in that consolidation, right? So we talk to analysts on a regular basis for clients on a quarterly basis for some of the public companies that are reporting numbers that ultimately get fed back to the street that help determine valuation, to working with analysts to help identify opportunities where understand how opportunities can be played out for our companies in the business. We use them to test messaging. We use them to test hypothesis. We use them when we are starting early on a project for a company and it might be a new segment for them. We will go and talk to 5 or 6 analysts to say, hey, I know this is not something you're used to from them, or you might not know them, but we want to get ahead of it with you to make sure that we understood, you know, does this make sense what they're doing and why? Do you see this as a need? And it just pays massive dividends, right? Because you get great insight. 2, a lot of times you can get a supporting quote for a press release, or they'll want to talk to reporters when you have stories, which add credibility, and you get great insight.
Absolutely. When it comes to ultimately the decision makers, though, in this sort of deep tech world, is there a point where, especially now with people being so inundated with everything, that they just kind of want to cut to the chase, like they don't want the tech? What does it do? How does it work? I mean, I get the sexiness of the big story, but when you're trying to move the business in this particular world.
Absolutely. And that's why it's always multiple, we call them threads, right? They're messaging threads. So we have that broader messaging thread that you're going to use occasionally when you get a chance with a publication like the BBC or USA Today or Wall Street Journal. But you're also going to have those core press that cover this tech specifically. They'll understand when you're talking to them the difference between XGS-PON and NG-PON2 and the role that GDSL will play, the role, they'll understand the tech, right? So they're the ones that if you look at the way the press is read is you have the network operations and the engineers and the IT managers, they read Network World, Lightwave, Light Reading, Tech Target, Capacity, depending on where they are and what they're reading. So they'll read those tech pubs. Their managers probably read the same things. It's when you're starting to talk to the C-level suite that you're going to get that the business press matters. Right.
Because it's where their mind goes versus where the consumer mind goes.
Again, that concept of helping the sales force overcome objectives is we're helping to overcome objectives at every level that has to be part of the purchase decision.
What are the most, I don't know if it's fair to ask this question, but where are the real biggest challenges in getting this kind of information from tech companies? Is it the tech company? I mean, is it the product? Is it the person? Is it, looking beyond? This is not in the normal org. So
yeah, it's a lot of it's in the person, right? Because tech companies are rightly so very proud of what they've made. And that's what they want to talk about. Right. So we start by saying, okay, let's first explain why this matters to the market, how it benefits the customer, and how it fits in your overall strategy. Because this one product doesn't exist to be the only product you make. It means it's going to open new markets for you. Customers are going to be able to do this. There's nothing else like it in the industry, right? Like those are questions we try to help shape. We actually have a pretty detailed PR questionnaire we require clients to fill out before we start drafting a press release.
Okay.
That some are great at it. and some you get the same answer in every answer. So, and there is no disrespect to any company, because, a lot of them are full of engineers,
right?
That, assume that everyone else is an engineer, and the people they're selling to are engineers. Our issue is we communicate through people that aren't engineers.
Right.
So it is, it just depends how willing the company is to make sure that they're talking about the value of the product and not just the capabilities of the product.
Makes perfect sense.
And sometimes, we'll work with a client for years before they get to that point.
Really? They have to,
Oh,
you have to really groom them and court them to understand, right?
Well, and then start to show them the results or the benefits.
Well, that was my next question, is that businesses in tough times now, you're working in a B2B environment. I don't know the range of your products you represent, but if there are huge infrastructure changes and all of that, I mean, how are you managing, but how are you showing clients the continued value of PR, or what does it take to show them the value of it?
Yeah, it's interesting. The best thing that ever happens is when they walk into a meeting and the customer has the white paper we're referencing, or has the articles that have been printed about them, or they walk in and they said, oh, our CEO just read that story in XYZ publication, and they said, we need to talk to you. Right. So the way we tell our clients to look at the value is, so if you have a first meeting with a customer, and we can give you back 20 minutes of the time when you spend explaining who you are and what you do, and let you start talking immediately about products, is that 20 minutes valuable? And every salesperson will say, oh yeah, we'll take that 20 minutes. That's what we try to do. We try to make that introduction at the technology level. So for us, am I answering your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So for us, we did benefit from the fact that we did not have a lot of consumer technology that wasn't, we weren't a PR agency that was doing retail, right? Like non-technology work. Right. So the bulk of our clients work in sell products that have been instrumental in people's ability to work from home, learn from home, entertain from home. Right. We had a client, we did lose one client almost immediately because they had a software as a service solution geared toward the hotel chain industry. Right. They were a workforce management solution for hotels.
Right. Travel is.
And and they were a monthly subscription basis, and everyone canceled.
Sure.
Completely. And we're like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But we've had a lot of opportunity to talk about, if communities that went ahead and invested in broadband are doing better than communities that didn't, right? We're starting to see trends like people are moving out of big cities because of cost, because this remote working is allowing them to live in a place that has a better cost of living or better quality of life, right? So those are all trends that we continue to find new trends that underscore the value outside of what a product does, the value that product brings to our customers' networks that we then lap back into the communications. Because PR is about much more than talking to press. But we believe PR is the message. And, as long as the client agrees on the message, then that message might be expressed with collateral, right? It might be expressed with things we never touch outside of that message.
I imagine, so you're a business owner. I guess you've probably had to do some of your own messaging in the last year. And, we've kind of beaten it at the working from home and where we're at. But moving forward, I mean, running a business, keeping your team going, building a culture. I mean, at this point, moving forward, it's got to be a little exhausting. I mean, where are we looking for, and how do you keep it going? I
had a full head of hair before the pandemic.
It's like when you see presidents, they go in and they're young and they come out and they look, you're just not the president.
Exactly. So teamwork and culture is very hard in this environment. I think, just like I think it's very hard for kids to succeed and actually learn in remote learning.
Right.
That culture of a classroom, that culture of an office that is an office where people enjoy being together and have fun and recognize there's a world-life balance.
Yep.
I think are a necessary part of the ability for younger staff, especially, to grow, and staff who've been around for a while to stay engaged. Like, I know that I look at, like, my day today is packed full of meetings, but yesterday I had a couple meetings and then some things to work on. And if I wanted to go read a book for an hour, I could do that. And no one would know, right? I just don't have my computer.
Motivation is too big right now.
Yeah. So I understand the stress of this, and I don't want to put any of my staff in a situation where they don't feel safe to be in a work environment. But we do, like, we're in North Carolina. So we're in the office one day a week. Now, if someone has a sick kid or doesn't feel well, they don't come in.
Sure.
But
are you all in? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but are you all in together on that day, or do you?
Everyone's in together.
Okay.
So we have a fairly large office, and everyone's desks are over 6 feet apart.
Okay.
So we have precautions to help people stay safe.
Mm-hmm.
But that sense of community, that sense of, hey, what are you working on? Hey, let me give you some advice, or think about this, is much harder when you're not face to face.
Yes.
Right. That creative, collaborative, energy that comes from me helping you make your project and you helping me make my project better is harder to replicate. So I've been doing this for a very long time, and I still send anything I write for a client to the team to review.
Okay.
Because they might think of something I didn't, or they're going to copy edit and find something
which is great, putting it out there. Yep.
Yeah. And one of the things, like, I will, continually remind the younger employees is ask people's opinion. No one is judging you. They just want to be helpful. And the reality is, even if you send me something and I ask you to change 40% of it, I would not have thought of that if you hadn't sent me what you sent me.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't have gotten 2 steps ahead if I hadn't had this as a baseline. So this was great work. It just, based on my experience, based on my conversations, based on my gut, I think if you take it this step further, it's better. So it's not a knock. It is. So I always try to make sure that people understand that as long as the work is good and they've done their best effort, I'm happy with that. I just want to help them make it better if I can. And sometimes I'm like, nope, that's good.
No, that's a great mantra. I think about, I had an editor years ago, and I gave him a story and it needed editing, right? And I felt terrible. It needs editing. And he said, look, that's why we exist. That's why there are editors. Writers sometimes need editors. And I try even now to keep that in my brain that, yes, there are writers, and I'm a writer that needs an editor, and it's okay. That's why they exist. So
absolutely. So I need a copy editor, 100%. I need a copy editor, because I think, when I wax poetic, like I often do, it's more clever than it is.
No, it's perfect.
And I'm fine. If you tell me, you kind of left the ballpark there, I'm okay.
We can all do. We all got our pluses and our minuses, right? Our expertise, rather.
Yeah, and we all make each other better. Like, it could be the one word that changes everything.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful philosophy as a leader. So I appreciate your time today. It was an enlightening conversation.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you inviting me.
And we will stay in touch and talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dana.
You have been listening to the PRovoke podcast, brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialists Marketeers. Support for this podcast comes from Notified, the integrated, intelligent and easy-to-use PR software. Get a free demo today at notified.com.